I'm Danny Moses, host of the On the Tape podcast. As many of you know, from time to time, I have my former partners and friends, Porter Collins and Vincent Daniel, join me on the pod. When they do, we normally call that segment, What Are We Doing? Well, in late August, the three of us got together and we launched What Are We Doing? Contrarians at the Gate on Substack. And within that Substack, we launched a podcast called The Friday Night Dirty. And last Friday, we had our friend and best-selling author of The Big Short, Michael Lewis, join us, where we reminisced about the past, talked about the current state of the markets, and took live Q&A from our Substack members. While I had Michael Lewis as a guest on the tape several months ago, I think you'll find this conversation even more entertaining. So please enjoy this episode of the What Are We Doing Friday Night Dirty. And if you like what you heard, please go in the show notes and subscribe to our Substack. All right, welcome to a very special edition of the Friday Night Dirty, brought to you by the What Are We Doing crew. I got Vincent Daniel next to me. We got Porter, Parts Unknown, and very special guest here, best-selling author Michael Lewis, and friend from The Big Short and friend from everywhere else. Michael, thank you for coming in here.
It's a gas to be here.
Well, we're going to get into your reason that you're here, and now you're going to be here again in a few weeks, and we just reconnected recently because The Big Short anniversary, the movie, the book, everything going on here. But why don't we start kind of with that, is that it's been 15 years since the book. Mm. It's been 10 years since the movie, right? And give us a little flavor for what you're doing now to kind of re-promote this and why we reconnected recently.
So it starts with the accident of the audio rights coming back to me. And I didn't actually read the book in the first place. And in just the last couple of years, Pushkin, my podcast company, has gotten really good at doing audiobooks. So they're not just books, they're kind of like dramatic experiences. So we thought, I'll read it and we'll do it that way. And the reason, so we had the rights is what got me thinking about this. And the reason to do it was that I have felt, I don't know how you guys feel about this, I have felt like that we're still living with that event, the financial crisis, yes. that you can point to a lot of things that are going on in the world now and say it goes back to that, and including Donald Trump. So I thought what we'll do is we'll re-release the book. People can listen to it or not, but we'll do like a podcast season on the side of it, just looking at consequences of the financial crisis, thinking about the financial crisis again. So to that end, as you know, I had some of my characters on, yes. And there's an episode with you three, and there's another episode with Steve Eisman and Greg Lippman, who was sort of at the spider at the center of the web way back when. But then there are other things. I mean, the first episode is with Adam McKay, the movie maker, because I mean, one, more people have seen the movie than read the book, but two, I was so interested, and you must be too, in how he took that and turned it into a movie. I never imagined.
Do you remember one of the first things we said? So we meet Adam McKay, and the first thing I think it was Porter or Danny said, how the hell are you going to make this thing into a movie that's going to sell?
I said that to him too.
And he goes, I'm going to throw a lot of eye candy at this thing. Right. And sure shit, he did. And it worked. God bless him.
I remember when you called us and you said, they're going to make this movie. I don't know how, but they're going to make it a movie. Yeah. And you told us that. So
when I read his script, I thought, I can kind of see it now, but only kind of. And it was such an improbable thing. I mean, it's amazing how well it turned out, given how hard it was to do. If you think about even writing it as a book, I can remember thinking, they're just real big obstacles here. Getting people at the center of the whole thing was a device so diabolically complicated, it was almost inexplicable.
Was there anything in the book that you wish got translated better or didn't translate well into the movie? Because we know the things that were fact and fiction that happened, in the movie versus the book, the alligator chasing Porter and I, things like that. He just obviously took fourth wall stuff with people. Was there anything that you would have done differently or anything?
It's funny, a movie script is 8,000 words and a book is 100,000 words. So they obviously had to leave at least 92,000 words out. But when I looked at it, I did not think, they should have put that in. I think, it's funny. The book ends with you guys sitting on the steps of St. Patrick's Cathedral, just watching the chaos. I can remember it, like nobody in the taxi cabs. The streets, Lehman had just exploded, and you all sitting there thinking, these people don't know what's about to happen to them. I thought that was I might have ended the movie with that, like I ended the book. I can't remember how they ended the movie. He ended the movie with a kind of essay, I think, right?
The only person going to jail was some.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And the movie, and I thought what attracted me to it was I didn't come to it with a lot of outrage. I mean, I worked on Wall Street. I was shocked by the stupidity of the big institutions. but it was more like awed by the stupidity. It wasn't like, oh, I can't believe they'll do bad things to their customers. That was, I didn't have any of that problem. So for me, it was just story. It was like filled with great characters. You all were some of them. For McKay, it was anger. I mean, the movie is much angrier than the book. And he really, I think he had to work to suppress his political, the political sort of op-ed that he wanted to write. And he didn't suppress it that much, but he had to suppress it for the sake of the story. I didn't have that much going on. So when I watched it, I did think, well, the tone is different here. Not only is it funnier, or it's overtly comic in places, but it's also, it's got this overt political purpose that the book really didn't have.
Right.
But Michael, we were definitely angry. Right. That was a big thing about, our group. They called, how is America's angriest hedge fund? Like,
so you were angry. I wasn't angry.
Right.
Yes, that's different. Right.
Yeah.
The characters all had different attitudes towards this thing. Yes, you were angry. I wasn't sitting there. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sitting there. I was I hate to say this. Yeah. I was delighted. Like, it was like, because I was just thinking of the material. I was thinking, oh, this is going to be so much fun to write.
I remember you calling it the sequel to Liar's Poker, or the bookend.
The bookend. It still feels like the bookend to Liar's Poker, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, it isn't. There's never an end to Wall Street. So it's a little. It's not the end of Wall Street. But this business of taking the investment banks and turning them into public corporations where all this risk could be taken, but if it went wrong, the shareholders, everybody else paid for it.
Right.
The misalignment of the incentives that started with Salomon Brothers going public, whenever it was 81, and was clearly not a bright idea, but and in fact gave rise to the material I had for Liar's Poker. It ends in 2008, and now, yes, we have Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley still exist, but what's going on inside them is much less interesting. The interesting risk taking has all been kind of squeezed out into other places,
Correct.
Right? Sort of like at Jane Street. They're of tertiary importance. These are tertiary interest in the risk taking world. Ares and Apollo and are taking one side of their business, and Jane Street and Jump and all the rest are taking another side of their business. And they make money. Maybe they make lots of money, but it isn't where the best and the brightest want to go anymore.
It is amazing how since the global financial crisis, what we're still dealing, obviously, with the after effects, with the debt on the government's balance sheet, the debt at the Federal Reserve and stuff they're still carrying. We still have the moral hazard issue. We still have all the same issues. We've never really dealt with it, right? Really haven't cleared, quote, all those assets.
You watch this more closely than I do, but what is left on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve?
A lot of U.S. Treasuries, and a lot of mortgage-backed securities.
They still own mortgage bonds?
Yeah, like $2 trillion.
They still have that.
Oh,
They're taking them off.
Right. Not the super exotic stuff.
Okay.
But they have MBS securities, which, when you think about it, they're artificially yield curve control, as they call it. Right?
That's right.
So you're keeping rates low,
right?
Because you need to, because we just have.
What the yield curve would look like if they dumped everything?
Well, they've tried, and they tapered. So they tried that for a period of time. It's 6.6 trillion though. Still at this point, it was 100 billion before the financial crisis.
It's interesting how that institution has morphed. It's just changed.
Yeah.
You go back to the Great Depression, and it existed, but it was scared of its own shadow. It wouldn't even inject a lot of money into the economy just to prop up the economy in a banking crisis. And now, it got so bold. It knew. I think Bernanke. We do have an episode in the podcast series along with the Big Short audiobook that is just on the Federal Reserve. And there's an economist, young economist named Emi Nakamura, who's she's a whiz bang monetary economist at Cal, who is a Fed watcher. And she said in the course of the conversation that Bernanke said he was aware he was gambling with the Fed's independence, that it was such a bold step they were taking that the political consequences, the end game might be no Fed independence. And here we are, right? It isn't
Fed independence, yeah.
It isn't for the same reason exactly. It isn't that, but it probably did undermine kind of the public trust of the institution in a way that makes it a little bit more likely Trump can just take it. Anyway.
No. So we have a ton of questions. We're going to mix them in here from our studio audience, so to speak. So John Lieberman, Ghost, the voice, why don't you come in here and ask a question and identify maybe who's asking it, if that's okay.
Yes, gentlemen, we have questions lining up for Michael and for the guys. We'll start with Gary Webb. Gary asks, do you guys believe that sharply higher loan modifications will be a precursor to rising delinquencies and defaults?
So that is a question for you all, but it's an interesting question.
Because that's more in the private markets that we're seeing all these modifications. Porter, you want to give that one a shot? Because all they're doing is extending and pretending, right? The loan mods. So,
it depends. I mean, we've seen the loan mods throughout every different crisis, right? It's in 08, they modded, over the last 10 years, they've modded everything. So do I think that's new? No, I don't think that's new at all. It's just extending and pretending. So,
well, Michael, where you asked where the risk has gone, it's in private equity to a degree. And now they want to send all this product to retail investors. And so we got to keep modifying so it still looks good, so it holds its value. And loans are picking payment in kind instead of paying interest. And by the way, they charge fees on payment in kind, which is incredible. So that's where the risk lies in the system. But it's not in the banking system, so people aren't as concerned. But Vinny has a thesis for when it does happen. What's going to happen, Vin?
Well, they're going to bail them out.
They're going to bail them out.
The problem is that because our pension capital, endowment capital, the big capital is now fully invested in private equity, it's too big to fail. So you know better than anyone, because you write about it all the time, where's the regulatory arbitrage? That's where that's where the smart money is going to heat seek.
That's right.
That's where they are, the Jane Streets, the private equities and the like. They get too big.
When you think private equity, what institutions you think about? You think about Apollo.
I think Apollo, Blackstone, right?
Ares.
And those guys, and
KKR.
and KKR. And to me, if and when the shit hits the fan, they're going to call their friends in DC and say, these pensions with ATMs are not going to open up Monday morning, and they need a bailout, and it's going to happen.
But I think the problem is our biggest risk. The three of us all see the biggest risk out there is the government. It's a $37 trillion issue, and it's the reason for what's going on in the economy. Right? They have to fund everything short. There's so much debt. We've transferred all that debt from the public companies through COVID through now. It's all sitting, and at the U.S. government. And the question is, who's going to buy that debt? The Chinese aren't really going to buy it. The Japanese probably aren't going to buy it. And so I think they're going to print the money.
So I want you to tell me a story that ends in a financial crisis. Like, how does it start? Is it some sort of auction failure? Is it what happens? Is it
at some point inflation that they can't disguise, right, is going to rear its ugly head again, right?
So Fed raises rates,
and the Fed has to tighten liquidity and raise rates,
right? And which raises the debt service payments,
which creates the spiral, right? Because right now the unknown that people don't really appreciate, in my opinion, is how freaking levered the capital market system is, right? No one buys treasuries just to buy treasuries on an unlevered basis. They do basis trades at 50 to 100 to 1.
I buy treasuries.
God bless you.
Well, not at 50 times leverage.
No, just by myself.
Yeah, by myself. Yeah. Do you buy bills or do you buy bonds?
Just bills.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No one's buying the long duration bonds.
Oh,
right. But if for the people buying long duration, someone has to buy them.
Right.
Silicon Valley tried it.
Yeah.
How'd that work out for you? Yeah.
But so they're levered 50 to 1, so they can make a small spread.
Right.
If all of a sudden volatility creeps up,
right,
because rates are rising,
right,
you create sort of a spiral.
So
that's the way
I don't want to ruin your podcast, but the other thing I want to hear you tell me the story of how a crisis starts in the private equity system, in the private equity business. Like, what happens? Loan failure to repay loans to these private equity lenders.
I think there's about 99% correlation in those markets to a lot of, they're all the same, to a degree, right? So if, whatever the loan to value is, debt to EBITDA coverage and things like that, without getting too wonky, but a lot of them might be in the same industry, but what it'll take will be one large asset that either fails or something that it turns
some asset class,
an asset class or a particular asset that's so big that the correlation of it means that the other bonds themselves also need to get marked down that are in the same sector, maybe.
Right.
And then you have this kind of one-time event. Because you hear about from time to time currency goes one way, someone gets carried out.
Right.
Nickel goes below. People get carried out. Like things happen.
Right.
It'll take one of those instances where some big fund is like, and then it's like, what else does that fund own? It has nothing to do. Just
of course.
Yeah, long-term.
So you think Blackstone,
Apollo,
etc. You whatever it is, you think they're too big to fail now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they're the new banking system.
That's it. It's really interesting.
Well, think about where a lot of the Washington appointees are coming from now. BlackRock, Blackstone,
Carlyle.
Right? It's at Carlyle. It's no longer, well, it is still Goldman and JP Morgan, but private equity has sort of moved in.
Right.
The way I think it'll happen is, in order for private equity to work, the investors, the LPs, need distributions to come back. So you sort of create, it's a bit of a, I don't want to call it a pyramid scheme, but there is a function of, hey, I'm making money off my prior investments. I'll invest in fund 25 while you're giving me money from fund 15.
Right.
If all of a sudden the money from fund 15 no longer comes in the door, I'm not doing fund 25. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And once you do that, then you say, well, there's no price discovery. And when do the pensioners say, I'm not getting any distributions?
Right.
That's
the way I think this.
All right, John.
Gentlemen, I'm going to jump in if you don't mind. Sorry, Porter. Porter's mouth is moving. We're going to come to Porter in a minute. But let's kind of do a lightning round because we literally have north of about 40 questions. Everybody has questions for all four of you. I'm going to start with two for Michael. The first is fifth risk has changed exponentially. Your thoughts, and then tangentially, Michael, reflecting 10 years later, what's the lesson that you learned from The Big Short, which wasn't obvious when you wrote the book?
So I'm not sure I understand what the question was.
The fifth risk is rearing its head again.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Yeah,
and then,
yes, and I'm going back in and writing another book. I mean, the first time, I mean, when I think about Trump and the government, the first time I think, he didn't think he was going to win. He was the dog who caught the bus. And he didn't arrive thinking with any kind of plan to run the government. And in fact, and what got me interested in the story in the first place, again, I'm like a story machine. I'm not looking for to make political points. But in this case, I thought it was wild that this person who had zero experience running anything like a government was being handed the biggest institution on the planet. And the first thing he does right after he's elected is fire his transition team. The 525 people who are supposed to go in and learn what the hell's going on, and they could provide him with some information. Like if I said you're president, you'd panic, right? What the hell is it? What is that? I got to run this thing. What is it? What's in the Department of Agriculture? I have no idea. What are they doing? And then he turns to Chris Christie after he fires these people and says, Chris, we're so smart, we can learn what they do in an hour. And I thought, well, that was just like a literary opportunity. I could go in and get all the briefings that they would have gotten from people who were sitting there with like finger sandwiches and Diet Cokes waiting to meet with somebody. And that when I started at like among the first meetings I took, I would call the people who were waiting to do it and nobody was showing up, was with the people who ran the nuclear arsenal in the Department of Energy. And it was like, I was the first one who showed up to hear the briefing. That's just wild, right? So that's Trump one is that. But the fifth risk is that it's like, what is like using his neglect as an excuse to figure out what the government does, picking just a few departments. I think now he's come in with a plan. It's not his plan, but it is a very detailed plan, and it's a radical plan, and it's to dismantle the federal government and reshape it as a purely partisan political thing. It's like a weapon to weaponize it. And that means something completely different. Neglect is different from, malicious.
Do you think this shutdown that we have now versus the last time, that, the amount of people that are there trying to run the essential services that are supposed to, these agencies, we're going to see some issues, obviously, potentially at some of these agencies, just because they're not as deep as they were. Doge came at the beginning of the year, and so it's
the big difference between the two shutdowns. You're right. He's now this is like a bookend with his first shutdown. Yeah. Is that the first shutdown his mind had not gone to, because the people around him, their mind had not gone down. It gotten to, what can we use this for? And in this case, they're talking about actually using just fire, like lots and lots of these people who were furloughed. Yeah. And so it will have that's a radically different act. The same people will be on the job, like the people at the airport who make sure you're not caring about. Yeah. The TSA people will still be there. They'll be, but they won't be being paid.
Right.
So it's a question of like when they start calling in sick. Yeah. And I mean, you'll see a degradation of services, and who knows how long it will last. That's not the big thing. The big thing is disruption of long-term projects that you don't even see. That's the big thing. And the price is very hard. It's very hard to measure the price. But anyway, once again, I mean, just as a matter of story, the material is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that the second question was about The Big Short.
What happened in the last 10 years?
So I would say the single biggest lesson that I got out of The Big Short, and it affected my life, was the power of incentives. Like what people did inside Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, Citibank, that was catastrophically stupid, putting their institutions at mortal risk because they were actually paid to do it. And that if you pay people to do stupid stuff, they'll do stupid stuff. So I don't know if I ever told you guys this, but after I wrote the book, I went to my publisher and I said, you do realize that my incentives are not, our incentives are not aligned. You give me a big advance. Mostly with authors, like you never see another nickel. You get, you don't have an equity stake in the book. And my incentive is to maximize revenues because I just get a percentage of the cover price and you're trying to make profits. I said, I've just seen the power of incentives. Let's sit down and figure out how to align our incentives. And ever since then, I've owned half the books and I don't take an advance. And it was because of this book. It was because I said, I've got to be so careful. If this can happen to those people, it can happen to me. Like you got to be so careful what your incentives are because you'll be led by them.
Yeah, it's like guys that run big funds that run $10 billion and they're clipping a 2% management fee. Mm-hmm. So they're going to make the money regardless. The question is, what is their incentive to create an incentive fee? All right, John, we'll take another question. I think Porter's going to have one also. Sorry.
Yep. Don would like to know, how has fiscal dominance changed the way equities are priced?
It's probably a Porter question if you want to do that.
Seems like whenever there's substance, Porter has to answer it.
Yes. Well, our friend Luke Roman, fiscal dominance. Yeah.
Well, the fiscal dominance, the fiscal dominance thing is basically just what we're talking about before, is that the government has basically crowded out everything, right? And now we're running, like 6% budget deficits, and everything post, I would say, COVID, to me, when we were running, the first Trump, when he started doing, tax cuts and deficit funding, and tax cuts, right? And so why were we doing that? Why were we giving tax cuts and running a deficit at the same time? It makes no fucking sense, right? It's just stupidity. I don't know why.
That's why we gold so much. Yeah.
But you're just stealing from the government essentially, and and we've been running deficits ever since, and I don't think we can get out of it. Right? That's the thing. It's like
you need inflation. Actually, the irony is you need to inflate all assets to get out of it. That's
no matter what administration, they have to run deficits. They can't. Remember when Biden was running? Like, what is he doing? Why is he running a 7-8% budget deficit? It makes no sense. And sure enough, Trump comes in. He tries to do Doge for about 30 seconds and flipped.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because we haven't been together.
I know.
Yes. I mean, we have not been together all together in a very long time. And I don't think I've ever got to ask you what it was like. I have two questions. What it was like being written about by me. When I showed up in your office, I was amazed you all let me in. It was really nice you let me in. If you would not let me in, I never would have written the book, because you were the first people who on the right side of the bet who I actually encountered. And you three and Eisman, it kind of explained to me what was going on, and my brain exploded. Was it uncomfortable having me around? Was after every time I left, were you all going in a room and saying, what the fuck are we doing talking to him? Were you upset with the book? I'm curious. I want to hear your take.
You want to give it a crack first, Ben?
No. First off, you called me on page 10. I don't know how I know that exactly. You called me young, fit, and handsome. So after that, everything was fair game. And I'm just going to testament to you. You are my favorite author. So the fact that you were writing our story, right? I was.
Well, that's got to be weird.
That was awestruck. Like I couldn't believe that. Like, he's going to write about us. This guy's going to write about us. So I'll speak for myself. I was more than happy to provide you the story that I felt like we were in the right. We tried to do the right, like, yes, we made a lot of money, but we tried to do the right thing. So for me, I wasn't that upset about or thinking like, what am I doing here?
If you remember, you came in through Meredith Whitney.
That's right.
So it was already pre-screened. But to Vinny's point, you were one of our heroes. I mean, you've written about Wall Street. And I think from Liar's Poker, we had that same thought process and mentality about Wall Street anyway.
Right.
So we'd seen a bunch of stuff. And I think we were excited. And what you did with, maybe didn't know it, but you were providing information to us by the questions that you were asking us. Because if you're asking certain questions, it made us think about, why would Michael ask that question? Like, how much risk is really in this system? And then you would go off and come back, and you go off and come back. And I remember each of us would meet with you separately.
Right.
We rarely would the four of us sit down with you.
No, that's right. There's a lot of independent
whatever. And so you would go and you'd be like to us, is that someone I should talk to? I'm like, yeah, let me know what they said. let me know what they're talking about. But I think you actually, there was a trust factor from the very beginning. And when you wrote the article first, remember, Vanity Fair.
No, it was Portfolio Magazine.
Portfolio Magazine, sorry. And then the book came out obviously after that, but it was already over by the time you written the book.
Right.
But no, it was, and Porter might want to opine on it, but.
Well, I actually explained this to Michael on the podcast the other day, but, I was the youngest guy in the team, and maybe it's because of my waspy conservatism or whatever. I was the most nervous about any of this stuff, talking, WASP were told to never talk about money. And, when my grandfather, who I was very close with, I forget, it was after he read the book or after he watched the movie. And he goes to me, well, why are we celebrating here? You guys, saw this coming, but like everyone lost their jobs and everyone, got destroyed. Like this is a horrible story. Like, and so.
So you gave it all to charity. That's what Porter did. He gave it away all the way. Yeah, exactly.
Which is
I did start a foundation, but
yeah, I know you did. All right, John.
So I got one more question.
Yes,
and that is like the movie. I haven't. I want to hear what the effects of the movie on your lives has been.
Yeah. Well,
you go first.
We'll find out about my testicle. That was it was from Adam McKay. Thanks for that. Porter likes to wear pants that are cut too short with no socks when he wears loafers. We got that, and then Vinny with his BlackBerry on his side and chewing gum consists. So a lot of the movie for me was like I felt like the three of us were sitting on the desk like we were. They did an incredible job, doing that. But
how does it rip? I've never had anybody make a movie.
We were still managing money when during that time period. So we've tried to not let it didn't really go to our heads at all. We enjoyed it. We enjoyed the fun about it, but we never took it seriously.
But did it attract a lot of attention to you?
If you mention the movie, like when you're with people, like they are kind of apprehensive of talking to you about it, right? But once they're like, "Can I talk about the movie?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm never going to bring it up, but bring it," right? Yeah. And I remember I was and of course I was fortunately played by Jeremy Strong, who's blown up and is a superstar now. And I was at a dinner, like one of these Wall Street dinners, and I just started going off on somebody on the other side, right? And because he made one of these stupid Wall Street comments with too much confidence, and I was like, did you actually speak to the person, or is this just a fucking opinion?
Yeah.
Right? And I just started going, and there was about four really good. So I think someone brought in models, and the four really good looking people goes, I know that character. Right? like Jeremy nailed you, right? And so shit like that every once in a while comes up.
Yeah.
Which is really funny.
Yeah.
I don't go ahead, Porter.
I think it fucked us up for a little while because we were known as the big short guys. So there was a period of, call it 5-6 years, and also we were still dealing with the crisis, and our head was still in the crisis. It was hard for us to be bullish because we were the big short guys. So how can we possibly be bullish?
Right. And
so I think it fucked with our heads for, I would say, a good 3-4 years. Thankfully, I didn't have to do therapy, but I did my own therapy, and I've cured myself. So it's good.
The problem is people are like, so what do you like now? Or what do you hate now? And what, that, and we explain right place, right time, right product to express a trade. But people forget it wasn't that trade. It was that trade was part of it. We had a short book, an equity book that we did. Well, we had a long equity book that did well. So that was just an extra tool that provided it. So
anyway.
All right, John, next question.
Curiosity.
All right. We have a lot of financial and investment questions, but here's one for Michael, because Rick Weeks has been super patient here. And Rick is asking on behalf of his daughter, Michael, what advice would you give to a young writer or would-be editor trying to build a career who's very concerned about adverse disruption coming from AI?
Oh, I don't know. So I have a couple of thoughts about this. My first step here is to say ignore it. I just don't think that AI is going to generate it. I don't feel threatened by it. Yeah, I tell you, and I don't feel threatened by it for a couple of reasons. One is, I think it's gonna be a long time before like AI can tell a good joke, a good original joke. Like it's not what it does. AI is going to generate the kind of intelligence it generates. It's kind of intelligence that codes computers. And I think it's going to be less good at kind of creative acts. The other thing is, if she's the kind of writer that I am, where you're going out into the world and finding stuff and trying to make sense of it, the AI only knows what it knows. Like it only knows. If it had tried to write The Big Short, it wouldn't have, before I wrote The Big Short, it wouldn't have known you. It wouldn't have known any of the characters. It wouldn't have had any material. So I think the exciting thing is going out into the world, finding things people don't know about, finding people that people don't know about, and organizing the people in the situations into stories that make sense of the world. And that's implying that you're gathering material that just isn't available to the machine. Now, afterwards, it may be able to take your thing and do something with it that replicates it or undermines the marketability of it or whatever. But the creation of it is still, it requires a human being interacting with human beings. So I just wouldn't worry about it. I would worry about something else. I would worry about when you define yourself as a writer, which young people will do. They think that being a writer means all you do is write. And in fact, I think even novelists and even poets, that they benefit hugely from having other kinds of experiences. Like, think how hard it would have been for me to write this book if I had not worked on Wall Street. Yeah. I was able to write this book because I'd spent 3 years at Sullivan Brothers. And it doesn't have to, it can be almost anything. You can be like a longshoreman. You can do whatever, you can be anything, but just having real world experiences, having jobs, doing stuff, informs the writing. And I think that's the big mistake young people think when they think I'm going to be a writer, is they don't it relieves them of the obligation of interacting with the world, and all the material comes from the interaction with the world.
All your books have focused, you tell the story through the character's eyes. That's how right. Unique, and that makes it unique.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And all the stories, I could tell you a story in every case that the reason I was able to get into the story is some life experience I had that led me to it. Or led me to be able to connect with the people it was about. The fact I played baseball really mattered when I showed. I mean, I never talked about it because nobody wants to hear about your high school baseball career. But it really mattered with Moneyball. Like, so having the experiences it's really important to accessing the stories.
John?
Yep, a bunch more coming in. Does the U.S. dollar still have a future as the reserve currency, or could alternatives like a BRIC system topple it and trigger a U.S. debt crisis?
We go back to Porter, because I know he's going to say, this is why we love gold so much. Yeah, Porter.
Well, I think there's two people keep talking about like the reserve currency. Well, I think you got to split it between the reserve asset, right? What do central banks own? And they're owning more and more gold and less dollars, like used to.
That's true.
Yes. and yeah. It used to be like, I want to say like 60% US dollars, and now that's down to like 30%. I'm getting the numbers wrong, but it's something like that, right? But everything in the world is of course priced off of dollars, right? Oil, copper, everything's in a dollar, so that's the reserve currency in the world. So I don't know.
It's why the China-Brazil connection with energy, that's why it scares the US Treasury so much. If the BRICS were to start their own currency or whatever it might be, it won't be based on dollars. It could be yuan.
The funny thing is the three of us see more and more risks building in the system right now. I know overruled. I know it's a bull market and stocks are at an all-time high, but it feels darker than it has.
Short argument. Overruled.
There are more.
Right.
There are more reasons to be nervous than, and they're getting into that. And this gets back to fiscal dominance, excess leverage. Like you say to yourself, governments can't spend in excess of what they're bringing in by 5%, 6% every year in perpetuity. Right. It just doesn't work. Right. Yet it's working. Right. No. So shut up, Vinny. It's working. Yeah. But we find alternative things. So yeah, eventually they're slowly eroding the purchasing value of the dollar. It's just a debasement story.
John, you got one for Michael there?
I want to make one comment. I actually thought that I was really fascinated by what Michael said earlier. And, rarely do you hear anyone say, oh, I don't think AI is a threat at all. But thinking about it, and he answered it very eloquently, but seems to me that we invest like Michael writes.
Yes. I was saying that. Yes.
And it's going against the crowd or doing something very different. Right. And I say it to my kids all the time, if you want to be, average, like this, just do what everyone else does. Right. But to be really great, you got to really think differently and think outside the box. And that's what Michael does. And as real world experiences, which is amazing. It's an amazing comment.
There's another way to say this about your investing and probably about my writing process. I think what gets people in the way of people having original lives is fear that you get interested in something and you look around, you say, well, nobody else is interested in this. So I shouldn't be interested in it. I'm out here on my own. And you can cultivate a muscle. And I bet this is true as an investor as well as a writer. And writers, you would think writers would not have this problem, but they all have this problem. They all want to write about the same thing. They're afraid of taking an extreme interest in something other people are not interested in, or taking a different kind of interest in a thing that everybody's agreed what the interest is. And the muscle is when you get that feeling like I'm out here on a limb, it's a good feeling, not a bad feeling. It's like you got to cultivate that sense. Like this is where the gold is. The gold is where nobody else is, and you don't want to be willy-nilly about it. You don't want to, but it's like something genuine gets you to a place where you're kind of all by yourself, and you don't get scared and retreat from that place because you got there the right way.
Yeah,
and it's so I tell you tell your kids this. I tell my kids that too. Yeah. Like, go with it. It's okay that nobody else is doing it.
So, John, I'm going to take over the question, which I know this was asked by a lot of people.
First time, long time?
I had this question myself. And I've already said that Michael's my favorite author and the like. So that said, in Ode of the Godfather, you have to answer for Santino, Michael, right? That's from The Godfather. Let's talk about Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah.
Right. And so and I know a lot of people were big fans of yours were upset.
Yeah.
I saw you, knowing that you're a character builder, must have fell in love with this guy one way or another. He must have fascinated you. How do you feel about post what has happened on SBF? Just curious of what your afterthoughts are, that it's still alive and fresh.
So this first thing, let me just, this probably, but let me just say it all over again. When I meet SBF, I don't meet him because I think I'm going to write about him. I meet him because Brad Katsuyama from Flash Boys, who you introduced me to, calls me and says, will you meet this guy? I just want to know what you think of him. And when I heard what he was up to and got kind of a little bit of a sense of him, I thought, I just want to watch. I don't know what this is. I just want to watch. I do this a lot. Like, I get interested in things and you just don't know where they're going to go. Yeah. And I got myself in a position where I was a fly on the wall and got to watch. I don't sit down. I don't tell my publisher I have a book or sit down to write it until after FTX has collapsed. So I had my ending. Like, I didn't know where it was going. It was, and what was really clear when I sat down to write is that the world had formed an opinion of him. Well, they'd formed many opinions of him. Yeah. Everybody loved him at one point.
I agree.
And then everybody hated him. And this is the world we live in, though. It's a world of extreme unmodulated opinion, and people get anchored in opinion, and outrage goes with the opinion, and you can't think about him as a human being anymore. I saw how nuanced and complicated a character he was, and I thought, this is going to be so much fun to write. I'm going to be leaning against the grain. This is about taking a different interest than other people take. I'm going to paint him as a human being, because I'm going to paint him in the way that everybody who actually knows him would recognize, rather than the people who are commenting about him on Twitter view him. And I'm going to make the reader live with the discomfort of, like, you could kind of like this guy. Not everybody did, but he was pretty brutal to his girlfriend, and there were reasons not to like him. But you had a choice as a reader, and I knew before it came out the day after the trial started. I said to my then 15-year-old son, Walker, I said, I'm about to go on a trip. The book is about to come out, and it's going to be really nasty. I see how nasty the world is towards him right now, and that's going to be redirected towards me. And he says, I say, you have to swear to me. And I swear, I made him swear to me, you're not going to go on social media and look and see what's happening. I get to New York. I leave him back in California. I come to New York. This is before the book has come out. It's a day before the book has come out. Nobody has a copy. It's been embargoed. So it is, but I've given an interview to 60 Minutes, which right. And the interview makes it seem like, well, it does. It's, as I feel very mixed about the whole thing. And I think there's, it's more complicated. I think I said on 60 Minutes, I thought everybody's going to get their money back, which they have.
And more.
But whatever, he hadn't just vaporized it. Yes, he'd taken it, but he hadn't just vaporized it. So anyway, I get a call from my son, and he says, this is awful. He says, everybody's saying all this awful stuff about you. And I said, you swore you weren't going to go on the social media. He said, no, I can't. He was crying. And I said, I promise you, this book, 20 years from now, people are going to love this book. It's going to just take a little while. We're dealing with, it's an irrational, noisy environment. And just trust me on this. I know this story better than anybody. I know him better than anybody knows him. And this is who he is. And it's interesting that it makes people upset that I have described it this way. So the next day, I get in the car to go do the first wave of publicity, the TV, and the publicist is waiting for me. And she says, I got some good news and I got some bad news. She said, the good news is that you, after having 30 0-star reviews on Amazon by people who could not have read the book, because the book is not available. So this is what's going on, right? It's think about this. People are human beings,
predetermined,
are going on Amazon to review a book they could not have read. So just think about what that means. So she says after 30 0-star reviews, you got your first 5-star review. It was really great. And she said the bad news is it's by Walker Lewis.
That's a great story.
And Walker, it's you can go see this review. She said, it's like Lewis's best book ever. All the critics are wrong. And he leaves it. He leaves his name on it.
It wasn't even.
This is Walker Lewis. And
it's amazing.
So anyway, I've made people upset with books before. This is
nothing like this one.
Moneyball was like it. You didn't say this to you. Moneyball was this great story that was an analogy. The baseball people were
the old timers.
Oh yeah.
Everybody. It wasn't the old timers. It was everybody. Everybody else in baseball thought they were made a fool of, and it was angry beyond belief. It was so bad that I could not watch ESPN games because they'd be trashing me or the book or whatever. It was routinely you turn it on, Joe Morgan would be saying something nasty, and so it was just, I've had this before. It's fine. And it eventually goes away. But this is what books are for.
Yeah.
It's to it's to challenge you a bit. And if I was doing it from a position of like an idiot who knew nothing, well, I wouldn't do it. I spent a year and a half interviewing everybody around this guy, watching this guy in action. I did not know he had taken the customer deposits and a bunch of venture capital investments, but neither did the 2,000 venture capitalists who invested with him. I mean, there was no way to know.
How was his Anthropic investment?
Oh, well,
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well, so here's an example. I think what's interesting about this story, there are a million things that are more interesting about this story than Sam Bankman-Fried used the customer deposits in a way he shouldn't have. I can see how he got himself into that stupid idiotic, criminal place. But when John Ray, who is running the bankruptcy and is in charge of disposing of these assets to get customer assets back, one of the first things he says to me when I sit down with him is that all the stuff he bought with his money is worthless. He just blew up the customer's money. And he said, for example, look at this thing. There's a thing called Anthropic. It's nothing. It's a piece of paper. It's worth zero. Sam Bankman-Fried owned 20% of Anthropic. What was this latest mark? 90 billion?
Yeah, some crazy number.
You could have paid back everybody with just that.
Yep. And somebody owns that. Somebody got that in the bankruptcy. They managed not to sell that. They did get a decent return for that, but he, like all the Solana coins, in that pile of supposedly worth of assets is a big chunk of SpaceX, and which John Ray did not know he owned, because he owned it. I knew he owned it because I knew that Sam had given money to Michael Kivas, who had specifically because Kivas was friends with Elon, because he got and enabled him to make this investment. I find far more shocking than the behavior of a single 31-year-old, the behavior of the entire bankruptcy system, for example, or the behavior of the entire crypto world, or the behavior of Wall Street and VCs in the presence of something that happens to be going up. That it seemed to me like the systematic stuff that I always thought Sam Bankman-Fried is a lens on the world. Like, you can learn a lot about the world just moving through the world with him, both up and down. And the world, of course, doesn't want to be learned about. It doesn't. It's an unflattering lens both ways. Yep. With politicians who took money from him, the VCs who didn't investigate him, the heads of Wall Street firms who wanted to be his best friend, the other crypto people who worshipped him, all that stuff, they want it forgotten. So one of the reasons there was so much anger is that people were covering themselves by being angry. They wanted you to forget that they'd been sucking up to him for the last 3 years. Yes. All right, John, you got a couple more in there?
Yeah, guys, I know we only have 3 minutes left because we have to get going, but this is a good, probably final question before you guys wrap up. Michael, will there be a Big Short sequel due to either AI or crypto? That comes from Tim.
I think my hosts are better equipped to answer that question than I am, but my instinct has been, since The Big Short, and since, as Porter pointed out, the moving of all these debts from the private sector into the public sector, my instinct has been that the next financial crisis arises out of the government.
Absolutely.
And so that's one of the reasons I've turned my attention to the government, is because of that. So I think it may not, it's going to be a different kind of book, because it's sort of like the financial sector won't be at center stage. It will be Washington at center stage. But yeah, I think something's coming. I don't know how. That's why I was asking you. Tell me the story of how it happened.
Well, I was going to channel my inner Danny, because only Danny, God bless him, will come up to you and go, "I got your next book." Right?
It worked once.
It worked.
It worked once.
Nobody has ever done that to me, and you did it.
That's right.
Flash Boys.
And so we've been talking about it before here, just studying and researching and saying the government is going to be a treasure trove for all your next few books. So, for example, I was thinking, probably top 3, top 5 worst things in this country right now is our healthcare system.
Yeah.
Right. There's got to be some character in there that's trying to do the right thing that you find fascinating, right? And keeps getting stonewalled to try and fix the system, but can't for a variety of host of reasons. Like, there's got to be so much in the government that's so
every time I tell people I'm going back into the government for another book, I get these glazed looks back at me. Like, they'd much rather me write about like sports gambling. But it is amazing the quality of the material right now in the government. You are right. That is why the next book I'm doing is about the government. And it's a little trickier making it dance on the page than making Wall Street dance on the page, but it can be done. And there actually are great characters. They're huge stakes. The stakes are enormous, but it does seem from a distance like this big black box. And getting inside the box is a little trickier.
So I actually think that, maybe it's not the United States, but if you go back to your like Iceland example, it's going to be, because the US can print money better than anyone can print money, but I don't know, France is in a really bad place. Canada's there's a lot of countries that are not in good places either. So it's probably going to be some big sovereign that has, been doing the same things that the US is doing that gets in trouble. That's what
That's an interesting thought. that it's sort of, but that, and the fact that I mean, it's a bit, this rhymes with the financial crisis. I was shocked when Washington does what it does in the back end of the financial crisis and the Treasury market rallies. It's because when it gets really shitty, everybody comes here. Yeah. And it's not like we catch a cold and everybody else gets pneumonia. So that's an interesting idea, that it starts somewhere or it's somewhere else that's the problem.
The UK or something like that,
I'm hoping for a sports gambling book at some point. I'm sure that's going to come.
No.
That'll come at some point, for sure. And I know you did Against the Rules last year with sports gambling. And normally when you invest that much time and energy, something always comes.
It's an interesting subject.
And Against the Rules is now the relaunch of The Big Short not part 2, but revisiting this part 2. So Michael, can't thank you enough for coming on live. What are we doing for the Friday Night Dirty? Everyone in the space, thank you for attending here. And you can subscribe. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions. If you send them to us, maybe I'll email Michael from time to time and get some answers to some questions, but you're a really busy guy. Michael, thanks so much for coming on. It's so
thanks
great
for
to
having
see
me.
you.
Great seeing you.